Hey. Welcome to episode 172 of the Titanforge podcast. I'm Dratnos, joined as always by Trell
Yo.
and Tettles.
Welcome back, Tretnos.
Welcome back.
We missed you last week.
Welcome back as well. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to welcome back to me especially, I agree. So,
Dude, did you know that Sylvanas is the icon for Twitch World of Warcraft still? I would have thought that they would have changed that to get us out of Shadowlands as fast as possible, but here we are.
Huh. Well, you learn something new every day. And today we're going to learn a lot of new things, or not, depending on how many of the things we talk about you already knew about, because we're going to talk about some of the recent changes that have been coming in on PTR, Incorporeal, Afflicted, other affix changes there, other dungeon changes, that sort of stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about the upcoming raid. We'll do a little quick rundown of all 8 of the tested bosses so far. Plus, we'll talk about a little bit of the last boss, which hasn't been tested, nor will be tested on any difficulty. And then some 10.1 prep stuff, and that'll be the show. Plan for the next few weeks, for those wondering logistically, is episodes for this week and then the following 2. And then probably we'll take a few off at the start of the actual Mythic coming out time of the patch. So that is what we're looking at right now, though. Okay, so let's get started by talking about the big news, one of the big newses of the week, which is health and damage nerf/buff, which is 25%. So they did this change already. They did this change by 40% late in the beta cycle, right? But they are sending it again with 25% on both player stamina and enemy damage. So effectively nerfing healing from healers. And yeah, how do you guys feel about another round of this change?
I saw healers were talking about this. I generally tend to defer to like healers in regards to this kind of thing. This season, healing felt mostly okay. Like healers' power relative to health bars felt mostly fine. It seemed like most healers that you ended up doing content with didn't have like severe mana issues. That was one of the concerns, that whenever they changed like the HP stuff, is like the more globals that you have to spend, the more costly mana is going to be. Seems like healers were mostly okay with mana this tier. I mean, if healers were calling for this change, it seems like it's probably just a step in the right direction to make sure healers, like, you don't have to heal up spikes, and the only available damage to be able to punish players is just like spiky damage, as opposed so like you can flatten it as a result, but it requires healers to spend more globals to heal up individual players. It's probably fine.
Yeah,
Those are my thoughts as well. I mean, we don't have a healer on the show, but I think when health bars are either 10% or 100%, there's like no in between. That's a problem, and that's kind of what the issue was here. So they're trying to make it so more healing profiles are actually good plays in every situation instead of just like holy paladin style heals.
Yeah, I feel like this was something that they were kind of forced to do by how strong Evoker healing was early in this patch. And then they were like buffing a lot of the other healers to try and get them to all be somewhat competitive. Nerfed Evoker by a little bit, but I think they still ended up with healers being a little bit too punchy compared to the incoming damage. And I think this change was good as well. Again, none of us actually main healer. I've been playing a lot of healer. Like I've healed several keys this patch cycle. Like I've done, I think, 24s on several different 24s on Resto Druid now this season. So it's it's something like I do think this is fair. Like I felt like I was like one global tops a player was pretty frequent, or one global tops of the group in my cooldowns, and that's a lot, right? Like that you can't. There's no room to go up from there, especially later into the expansion. So I think expanding the health bars again, making it so, because even Razageth, you could already start feeling like Razageth felt like one of those end of expansion Shadowlands BFA bosses where it's just like you're dead in 0.5 seconds to 2 damage instances, right? And it's just like, okay, this is not healing, right?
The first time you die to the bombs in phase 1 on Mythic Raz without in your 85% HP, but you don't have a personal pop, you're just like, well, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, so I think this is a good change as well. It was a change that Automatic Jack on Twitter was calling for before it got made. So I have seen some healers that have been against this as well, but it's definitely not one of those things where it's like, oh, the DPS think it's a good change, the healers think it's a bad change. Like I think it's just some people are on both sides of it.
They universally like buffed like hybrid healing too,
So
in order to try to counteract a little bit of this.
So they buffed a lot of healing by 25%. Now they didn't buff. One thing that you'll not find in this patch notes is Ancestral Guidance, Nature's Vigil, or Vampiric Embrace. Those
Which
effects
VE's
are
already
not in here.
Yeah.
So
VE's getting a pretty big nerf this 10-1, right?
Yeah, well, and also it by being not included in this, they're sort of getting like all other off healing is getting at least 25% buff, and then some abilities are getting even more on their off healing, right? Getting like slightly bigger buffs to it, but then those specific cooldowns, those group healing off healer cooldowns, are not included in the buffs, the 25% buffs. So those are getting a relative nerf. Also, a thing to note is the tank side of things as well. When you see a change like this, you think, okay, how's this going to affect tanks, right? Because tanks also have abilities that are based on incoming damage, that kind of stuff. It seems like they've done a reasonably good job of just kind of buffing all tank healing abilities by 25%, but I know there are a few specs that have maybe missed an ability or two. After the Wildfire, for instance, for Guardian, is not in here, which is bad news for that spec, which did not need any more bad news, but they made sure they gave every single paladin healing ability at least 25% back.
They also they actually buffed more than 25% on some abilities, like the off healing on Ret or Monk Vivifies. They also buffed like some other passives like Monk's Celestial Fortune. That's actually just kind of a straight buff, I think, instead of just increasing it to match this 25% take up on everything. It's interesting. We're gonna see how that plays out.
This has been a weird season where it's like hybrid healing is quite strong, but then it's like a lot of the hybrid healing spells are also very underwhelming. If you think of things like Vivify, Regrowth, Healing Surge, that kind of thing, it's like it requires like a lot of those to actually do any significant amount of healing, and then you're like, I pressed AG, my whole group is topped. You're
right.
Like, well, something feels wrong here.
Like off healing is strong in the context of cooldowns, right? Off healing cooldowns are strong.
Yes.
But the ability to press Vivify on somebody and impact their health bar was not strong. And that is now changed. I think that's healthier, right? I think it's better if like I have to cast a Vivify or a Healing Surge to off heal and not just like press Nature's Vigil and forget about it, right?
I agree. Do you think we're going to end up seeing like HP adjustments every single patch this expansion? Do you think we should? I guess is another question.
I think it's probably indicative of something wrong / unhealthy underlying if they have to make this change frequently. If they have to do it every few patches, or like the opposite change whenever they feel like it's moved too far in either direction, it's not the end of the world. But whenever you see them make like the same adjustment 2 patches in a row, you do think, okay, is there just like a coefficient somewhere that should be different, right? Instead of having to actually make this adjustment. But I don't know. I mean, anytime there's a change like this, like I think it's just this seemed like a good change.
I never hate this change. I think this change is normally fine.
I guess if they have to keep making it, I think they should find some more elegant, predictable, systematic way to have it just be baked in. But even if they have to just do this every patch for this expansion and then solve that next expansion, that's fine by me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reminds me a bit of a Threat. Remember? Tank Threat every patch getting its buff.
Dude, Threat is still so stupid. It's like even still you'll have like prop paladin, if they're not like actively shielding a target, sometimes like a random mob just won't get hit by shield enough and like somebody will die in a pack. You're like, that's the best tank at holding Threat. Why how do they lose Threat on a mob in the middle of the pull?
Yeah, that's pretty annoying. And this is even like Threat's been a lot better recently than it has been a lot of patches. Like I think I'd say maybe it's 20% as much of a problem as it usually is.
Yeah.
But every tier that goes up, Threat usually becomes a little bit worse until they buff tank Threat in some way.
All right. So that change came in. Not too much else was included in this patch reset or patch set of changes. They buffed, or they had some notes though for all 12 of the game's classes in these patch notes. So that was good there.
Well,
What was it? Not mage? No mage
No mage,
notes?
yeah, no.
Yeah,
Dude, what happened to mage? There hasn't been a single change in so long.
in
All
3
12,
months.
all 12 of the game's classes are getting the attention they deserve. So we also saw some Mythic Plus affix changes to both Afflicted and Incorporeal, which I think were pretty much the changes we were hoping to see for these affixes. Although this particular post by Squishy, and I've been talking to Squishy about it as well, he feels like there's still quite a bit to go on Incorporeal. But let's start with Afflicted by talking about what's happened with Afflicted. So the Afflicted affix has received a massive spawn rate nerf in this patch. The maximum number of Afflicted that can spawn is now capped at 2, and there appears to be a 15-second ICD between spawns. This allows a lot of time to relax between dealing with waves and makes it much less overwhelming. And even though there is that ICD, sometimes it's not like they spawn on a 15-second timer. It's just that there is a 15-second
Yes.
ICD. So, yeah.
I mean, another big thing about there being a 15-second ICD is Dispel.
Right.
With the ICD being as long as it is, you're going to be able to have the ability to dispel multiple times, even in some instances. Now, there is a question of like, what are you supposed to do if there's like a dispel in a pack versus like the afflicted mob? At that point, I think you're just gonna have to heal the afflicted mob as opposed to dispelling it. But I think that the 15-second ICD should allow for better outplay potential, or if you have like hybrids and stuff like that, you should be able to throw out 2 dispels immediately and just automatically remove the afflicted mobs, assuming that you're attempting to interact with the affix itself, which I think is the way it should be.
Yeah, I was already pretty close to just signing off on the old version, and now I think this is ship it like this, right? This
This looks good to me.
this affix is looking great. So it's going to be nice to have an off dispel in your group for Afflicted Week. That's definitely going to be a valuable thing, but I don't even think it's going to be necessary at this spawn rate. I think it's just going to be a case of like that makes it better, but not it's not mandatory, right? If a healer has to dispel one and heal the other, then I think that's going to be fine on a lot of pulls as well.
Yeah, seems like it's in a good spot now, even better than it was before, and it was already pretty decent, like you said.
Incorporeal has also received a large spawn rate nerf this patch. The maximum number of Incorporeals that can spawn at a time is still capped at 2, but sometimes only 1 would spawn even on the largest pulls. There now appears to be a 20-second ICD, but it does seem more like they do spawn every 20 seconds rather than, sometimes waiting for a while between that ICD, which is something that, because of the way that Incorporeal works, so I'll summarize the thought section of this, which is basically that because of the way Incorporeal works, whenever one spawns, unless you have somebody like a mage with polymorph, a druid with hibernate, a warlock with fear, a paladin with turn evil, right? So a class with one of these spammable buttons that can just be used without a cooldown to press on an Incorporeal and it goes away for its full 20 seconds. If you don't have access to one of those, you're going to need to commit 3 globals worth of hard CC to it or of CC to it to stop it from going off in those 20 seconds. So if your group doesn't contain classes that have those effects, it is a lot of work to be able to either land those interrupts or use those stuns and stuff to keep those mobs controlled. And if you're having to deal with 2 every 20 seconds, potentially that's as many as like 6 globals, and not just like 6 any globals, but 6 globals from the valuable resource pool of interrupts and stuns and stuff to keep them under control. That being said, if you're just in a group with a mage and a warlock, and you can just be like, okay, mage will always poly one, warlock will always fear the other, it's free, right? So
yes,
it is pretty. I do kind of agree that like the gap between mage, poly, and DKs and warriors who have nothing, for instance, that is anywhere close to as good, right? They'd have to use like Stormbolt, Asphyxiate, Kick, those very, very powerful buttons, and even then you have to do 3 of those to stop the Incorporeal from going off, compared to 1 polymorph.
So I guess there's a question of how is this different from Afflicted then, because warriors and DKs can't interact with Afflicted at all.
Yeah, but Afflicted is like a much lower bar for handling, right? Because
I agree. Yeah.
Like
because it's not active for 20 seconds.
Yeah.
I think the options for dealing with Afflicted are way easier to have in the group than the options for Incorporeal. This is getting closer to being playable. I mean, it's obviously playable in most comps, but like it needs to be universally playable. And I think that the internal cooldown should probably be 30 seconds at least. probably.
Oh, you would reduce their spawn rate further is the way to fix, as opposed to
Yeah.
change functionality of like how
So
they work.
I,
Okay.
I want to propose some functionality changes that would be good for this. So the downside of doing a functionality change is that you do remove the like value of polymorph and hibernate and turn evil and warlock fear in particular as being like, you know, silver bullet answers to this affix. If they really wanted to preserve that, I would kind of understand. Those are, I guess, cool counterplay things against this affix. But if instead these things behaved like the bats from Shrouded, where 1 CC and they're done, right? You could buff the spawn rate a little bit even if you
Yeah.
did that, right? And it was just like, oh, you have to either interrupt or CC them, and then they go away for good, right? And then it's not a case of like, oh, polymorph is, you know, way, way, way better than having a warrior that can stormbolt every other spawn wave, and even that needs to be well timed and then complemented with 2 more globals of good stuff, right? So I think that, or the Razageth solution of like a stack of buffs on it that's like, okay, CC me 3 times and I go away, right? And that's
Yeah, maybe 2 stacks.
that sort of
not
thing
3.
could work. Or give it that longer CD on the spawn as well. I think could work. And maybe if you give it the longer CD on the spawn, you could also nerf the polymorph as an answer to it by making it break out of CC after being CC'd for 6 seconds, right? Like max CC length on it is 6 seconds from any ability, something like that.
What I will say though about increasing the or lowering the ICD is like if you have too many of them spawn or not lowering the ICD, but like lowering
Increasing
the
the
ICD.
spawn rate, yeah.
Yeah, if you increase the spawn rate, like I really start to worry about things that aren't spammable even still, because like I don't know, like Para's what 45 seconds CD, stuff like
Right.
that. Even like medium effectiveness CCs also start to run into an issue.
If you make it the
Yeah.
bat solution though, you have like, again, remember these things are interruptible too, right? So if you took these mobs that are 20 seconds and require 3 globals and you made them spawn every 15 seconds but require 1 global, I think that's a profitable trade-off. That would be, because I think that at 20, with if it took only 1 global for sure from anybody to take care of it, that would be too little.
It's still a weird situation because CCs are so valuable.
Yeah.
In the current landscape of how M plus functions, and even single target CCs, a lot of times you'll throw a single target CC at a very specific cast or mob to make sure it doesn't recast an ability. Or you're saving it to make sure that this very specific thing doesn't happen. I'm thinking like the Earth Shapers and Ruby Life Pools. You're saving it for their Earthquake cast, right? And you'll cage them or Stormbolt them or something like that. You'll throw like a single target CC at them sometimes. And it's like, oh, then instead you're being asked, like just take that first pull of Ruby Life Pools, for example. Instead, you're being asked to either throw CC at the Incorporeal or throw kicks at the Incorporeal, which you're already kicking Chill Weavers. It just feels like a dynamic that is in opposition of like how M plus normally should be played. I don't know. It's a weird one. I think that like lowering the amount of CC that has to be thrown into them should be promoted, because CC is valuable in M plus, and like I don't think you should be punished by throwing it into mobs. I think that's like, if you're getting punished by throwing it into mobs to stop casts, I think that misses the point of like what M plus is.
Yeah.
I agree. And in high keys, there's very few instances where you just have all this unused utility in your group. Like it's actually really rare, because everybody has to use every single part of their class to do these pulls.
I think the cool thing about Incorporeal though is that there are like the turn evil, hibernate solutions to it that exist as well. I agree. Right? So
yeah, but that's so polarizing. It's like if you don't have any of those classes, this affix is like 10 times as hard as it could be with one of those classes in your group. Because like 3 stops, it's gonna be hard to even coordinate one time to put 3 stops into one Incorporeal mob,
right?
Let alone every 20 seconds. And there's 2 of them.
And that's the problem, right? Is that then you would just like always bring a mage and just poly one, right? And that's like so free compared.
And even then, that's only like a medium efficiency solution, because you don't want a mage spamming poly. They need to.
Well, they only cast it once.
Right? You want a Resto Druid. You want a
healer that can
hibernate one, cyclone the other, or something.
Yep, hibe one, clone the other. That is the solution, especially at 2. Like that's always going to be the solution: is hibe one, clone the other.
Yeah, I think that so I think moving away from that would be good. Maybe they should even look further into the Razageth solution of like, what if it was like, oh, these things can be soothed or or purged or like anything, and go away after receiving like n hits of that.
This is the issue that I see is like most of the solutions. It's like I'm bringing the Resto Druid. He's cloning one and hiving the other.
Yeah.
And I am vibing.
I mean, so to some extent, like if the affix gets solved in the very highest keys by making the healer do it, I don't know, man. It's kind of hard to design
just like
affixes that don't
explosive
work like
was.
that, right?
Like it's the same exact problem. Like this is 100% going to end up a healer problem unless they do something like
unless
Sparks.
or unless they make it. I've always thought they could try making these affixes where it like is locked to a certain player, right? It's like the incorporeal spawns for you. You need to handle it in the next 20 seconds, or else you get the penalty.
I just hate things that force you to throw your kick. But I hate things
if it was like if it spawned to you, it lasted for 20 seconds, and any ability of yours basically would stop it. I feel like that would be. I mean, because the affixes have to do something.
I could be down
right?
for that.
Yeah.
I could be down for that, especially if it's tied to you, and especially if it also gets hit by AOE CC. And
yeah,
stuff
that's
like that.
true. Because then it could be affected by AOE.
Yeah, if it could be hit by your AOE CC, if you could see it, like if it spawned for you and it was like your thing from beyond or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, that's a lot more reasonable, and I think that's a situation where I'm a bit. We're getting closer at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Worst case, if this ends up being like every group has a healer that handles druid. 1 to 2 of them, and then like a mage or a warlock or something that handles the other one, a paladin. The paladin tank just throws a turn evil on one of them every time it spawns. Like, it's pretty bad, but it's not.
My prediction for this affix is that it goes live kind of how it is now, which is not great. And then one of the good classes just happens to be meta, like let's say Resto Druid or H-Pal or Priest healers that can handle
Priest healer, yeah.
And then so it doesn't seem too bad this season. And then all of a sudden next season, there's not a single healer class that can do that as meta, and all of a sudden it's just a terrible affix, and everybody realizes.
Well, what healers can't do it, right?
Mistweaver
Hex has a CD, right?
No, Mistweaver has CD on Para.
Yeah.
Shaman doesn't take Hex.
Evoker has nothing.
They do on Incorporeal Week, I suspect.
Oh, Evoker actually doesn't have anything except for Quell, do they? Wait a second.
Well, they have that like walk toward you spell, but I think it has a CD, right?
Yes, Sleepwalk is what it's called.
Interesting.
I've seen it used one time.
Janus does not know what that is. He goes, "What the hell is?"
Remarkable. Is that like Song of Chi-Chi?
It kinda. It's a single target one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
because it needs to be targeted, right? That's the problem with this affix, right? Is that these things don't get hit by like sweep, they don't get hit by shockwave, they don't get hit by any of that stuff.
I don't know.
I guess 4 of the healer classes do have a tool for this currently, so that's not the worst thing. But yeah, if you're a poor Mistweaver or Evoker, I mean, what do you do?
I didn't think about Sleepwalk. I mean, it's 15-second cooldown, right?
That's good.
That's good. I guess like mana 1 every time.
It's a green spell as well. It's always funny for me that Evoker spells just have a color up here sometimes. That's funny. Okay. Well, that's the changes that have come in for Incorporeal and Afflicted on this week's PTR build. Entangling also seems still unchanged, and I think doesn't need changes. I think.
Oh yeah,
good for live.
You missed the show last week. I mean, you have any thoughts on the circles? I mean, the circle is massive. It is very clear that you have Entangling on you now.
Yeah, and it seems fair to run out of. I don't know. I guess I've been playing Blood DK, but I feel like you only get 70% slowed anyways, right? Or 70% move speed anyways, right? So Death's Advance isn't even super OP against it. Yeah.
Entangling seems great now. Good affix, honestly.
At affix zones. All right. We also have some dungeon tuning. There have been a lot of abilities that have been getting some changes. You remember Blood Harvest?
Yeah, they changed the matrons.
Yeah, look at this. It's got a cast time now, and also they've cut its damage by 60%.
So I guess at risk of just rambling on about all of these changes, we can kind of just hit the high points. Basically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to buff Freehold Underrot and Vortex Pinnacle to not be too easy. In addition to that, they changed some of the stuff that's happening in Freehold. Like the fence strat is now gone from the first boss, but now Crag's like shot, instead of it being just like an initial hit, it's like a medium hit, and then it's like got a dot component to it, so it's healable. Like that's going to be good.
That's
In
good.
addition to that, they changed a lot of the trash and underrot. The matrons getting a little bit of a change. Now Decaying Mind, which was from the Lashers, has a 28-second cooldown and doesn't recast on CC.
Oh,
Dark
like that.
Reconstitution, which is the heal from the Mender at the very beginning, also doesn't recast on CC. Wicked Frenzy is kickable, also doesn't recast on CC. So they're changing a lot of the mobs in Underrot to be not recast on CC. Plus, Wicked Frenzy's case, it's kickable, and so they're doing a lot of cool stuff with the dungeons to make them more palatable for players and to kind of fall in line with what we saw from this season, where most things don't recast immediately, or if they are like a mob that's supposed to be chain casting, they have like a 5-second cooldown to where at least you can throw ACC into it and it stops them for a second as opposed to the insta recast.
Dude,
Yeah,
the
that's really, really
water
cool.
Lancers in Temple of the Jade Serpent. Ugh.
Oh man.
Yeah, but like those are the only mobs that I think are like that this season, because even the Thundercallers, the Thundercallers are supposed to be chain casting, but if you hit them with a CC, they stop for 5 seconds because that's the cooldown of it. It's just like a low cooldown ability as opposed to a chain
Yeah.
caster, which is like it's a little bit different.
Well, the Thundercallers got changed, the same kind of change, but the
Yes.
water speakers did not in
Yes.
Temple, unfortunately.
And so I think that they're making moves in the correct direction for the landscape of M+. But in general, they're trying to buff up the 3 dungeons that I named, which are Underrot, Vortex, Pinnacle, and Freehold, because they are quite a bit easier than other dungeons right now.
They've also made some visual adjustments as well. Freehold's been getting a lot of like visual clarity changes to some mechanics, and also they've been changing the boss one-shotty or boss
Yes.
unfair combos. Skycap and Crag. They've changed the powder shot to a 60-yard ignores line of sight cone, but it does way less damage up front, and now it leaves behind a little bit of a dot afterwards that is dispellable. So they're trying to kind of kill the like plank strat there. Eudora is always going to jump to somewhere before she starts her shot, and that's also doing less upfront damage and leaves a dot. She's not going to shoot the same person within 6 seconds. Those sorts of changes are being made to kind of make those bosses. Because everybody remembers Freehold as being a great dungeon, but that was actually the dungeon that was the hardest on like the lowest key levels on Tyrannical back in BFA.
Now, allegedly,
True.
They changed something with the RP event too, where it's always completed, and that's going to change something with like count differential. It's going to change how the mobs are set up as well.
Kraus was telling me about this, and
Yeah.
so it's like bugged because it's supposed to be you're allied with the same captain every week, but there's still some kind of rotation on, you know how like if you fought the mobs around the second boss area before you killed the boss, some of them would like become active even though they're friendly, and they'd still fight you. Well, those mobs still are on rotation, even though they're supposed to. Like if you kill the boss, I think the same mobs run away every week for right now in the current state. But if you fight them before the boss, it's like you get the old rotation for a second.
That's cool. I remember that being a big part of the plan. Was like that was part of the route, was even knowing which mobs were going to do that and getting the count from them.
Yeah, I kind of liked that. It was kind of cool to plan out Freehold for the week or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
it's something like that is the current situation. I don't know what it is exactly, but it sounds like it's still being iterated on.
It should probably go, if we're being honest, right? Like that should probably not be there.
I don't know. I think that overall they're continuing to push forward and making changes to a dungeon that is largely seen as one of the best dungeons of all time, and continuing to improve it. So
yeah, that's the thing. Is like I think like I love Freehold. I still celebrate changes to it because Freehold is this dungeon that like had a lot of great stuff to it, but definitely also some stuff that needed some changes. Yeah, it's crazy actually when you look at it. Like there's a lot of cringe in that dungeon, but it just the rest of it was so nice. Yeah.
Apparently they also changed Swiftwind Saber.
Yeah.
To not be some like instacast thing. It's now got like some travel time. You're able to dodge it,
and
it shows the animation way better.
It like aims at one player now before loaded dice all hands is active, and then during loaded dice all hands it's like 5 random shots instead of 15 or whatever Saber's heat seeking missiles stuff.
They also changed the tank being able to be the barrel target on the second boss in Freehold. That was always very tilting.
That's so legend has it that's GUID based, which is why it would go on the same person over and over and over again. So hopefully they changed that part of it as well.
Now it prefers like DPS then healers then tanks. So
it
may still have a GUID tracker. It may still GUID an unlucky DPS or something, but never know.
Yeah, what we mean by GUID, by the way, is like when your character was created or how long it's been on a certain server, like how long the character has existed, sometimes determines who gets what mechanic, which is really strange to hear probably, but that's how a lot of things work in WoW.
Yeah, N'Zoth tentacles. If you look at Warcraft logs for N'Zoth tentacles, it's like there's usually somebody in every raid who is getting hit by twice as many as the rest because they're just
Yeah.
they rolled their GUID. I don't know.
There's something
remember
recently that was
there-
like GUID based and was like really, really annoying.
Yeah, I remember something in
Razageth?
Temple of Sithralis.
I think
Someone would always
Razageth's
get targeted
fulminating
by something.
charges as well was something
That's
that's
what it
speculated
is.
to be GUID. Yeah.
Oh
That's
yeah,
what,
bombs.
yeah. I got every single fulminating charge. Like I don't know most of them.
That's good.
It was not good. I hated it.
No, that's good. It's good it goes on a chicken. Those things do that well.
It's good because I can shapeshift and it's annoying because it's always on me.
Yeah.
So the moral of the story here is swap realms often so you're not the oldest character member in your group.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit about Aberrus, the Shadowed Crucible. This is the upcoming raid, and we've now gotten to test all 8 of the testable bosses on normal. I guess they have been all on normal, heroic, and mythic. I've only tested them all on heroic and mythic, not the lower difficulties.
You didn't do normal testing?
I did not do normal testing. No, did you?
No.
Okay. Yeah, normal testing is actually weird because it's active for like the whole weekend, and the Race to World First guilds actually spend like kind of more time on that than they do. Well, I mean, they go hard on the mythic and heroic testing too, but the normal testing they also go hard on because they want to do like big, DPS testing of all the different specs and that kind of stuff. And so just having the whole weekend for it is really good. But
yeah,
my guild and most other guilds are not particularly interested in normal testing. That's a lot less fun. So, the way the raid works is you kill the first boss and then it opens up into 2 wings immediately, and then those converge again midway through the raid, and the last like 4 bosses are all in a row. So you kill Khazar the Hellforged, and then you can either go Amalgamation Chamber, Forgotten Experiments, or you can go Assault on the Zakali, Rashok, and then you go Zaskarn, Magmarax, Neltharion, Scale Commander. I think Zaskarn might technically be after Rashok as well, or like maybe it's the end of one wing, but either way, that's the way it works, right? Is you do those, you reconvene, and you do the last 3 or 4 in a row. The bosses have been reasonably cool. They felt kind of nasty for melee. They've also been largely single target oriented. There hasn't been a lot of ads, with the exception of like Assault on the Zakali, which had a lot of. Obviously, that's like an ad.
That is an assault
fiesta.
fight.
Yeah.
Oof. That fight went from one of the worst heroic bosses I've ever tested to being, it was a little bit more manageable in Mythic. It was a little bit more palatable. Goddamn, one of the worst fights I've ever played on heroic. It was so bad.
Yeah. It was, it's one where like I feel like if I just can kill the mythic version of that fight and not hate it, that's a big win for,
Yes.
any fight that's got the word assault in it. They're just it's always like that. I don't know. So it's an interesting path though that you'll take through this raid. The first boss, Khazar the Hellforged, is pretty cool. It's like a shadow dragon thing, a shadow flame dragon that is I don't know, pretty nifty, but first boss, they'll probably die very quickly, so not likely to be a huge time coster.
What do you guys think about the low damage single target specs right now going into this raid? Like Monk and Boomkin are just looking real bad.
Well, I think I think Boomkin, it's always got a spot in raid. We'll say thank God Mark of the Wild is a thing, I guess. I don't know.
True.
It's class tuning in general has been pretty much non-existent for this raid tier, and it's like the things that were good at the very beginning of raid testing have maintained top status. All 3 Warlock specs are broken. Hunter seems quite strong with like 100% uptime on True Shot. Not 100% uptime on True Shot, but like very high percent uptime on True Shot. That Lizard thing, Dev Evoker, also seems pretty good. So, and then there's like some gamble specs for Enhance and whatnot that also look decent. I don't know. It's weird. It just seems like they just haven't done class tuning at all.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder what's going to happen with like Windwalker, because in a lot of cases, this is just an example of one of the many specs, but like that class needs something like a 30% buff for a single target to be competitive. I don't know. Well, it doesn't affect me in this case though, because I am actually tanking for my guild next year because of how bad Windwalker is and our tanking situation. But I'm still like kind of worried about it.
Congratulations on your tank. Congratulations on coming back to your roots. The OG Troll Titanforge podcast returned to tanking.
Yeah, tank prison once again. I escaped it for a couple years.
Yeah, there's no escape. Once you tank once, you cannot ever free yourself permanently. It's just unavoidable.
I tried to make a clause where I only have to tank progression, and then somebody else has to tank farm.
And they said,
and we'll see how that goes.
Good luck. I mean, the thing about farm is like if you tank progression and you're good at it, and then you say, "Yeah, I'm out of here this week. Good luck." What are they gonna do? Lob you if you're still gonna tank next frog? Like, no, obviously they're not gonna. You got them right where you want them. So,
well, on the upside too, you can actually just if there is a tank that's good for raid, if there's a tank that's better for M+ than for raid, what are they going to do? Say, no, you're not bringing that tank to raid this week? No, you're absolutely showing up on that prot paladin and gearing that thing immediately.
Yeah. That is the nice thing about playing tank is that, like, you can gear your alt tanks very easily in raid compared to, like, if you're a DPS and they're like, no, we need you to play, you're good DPS or whatever. But if you're a tank, like, you just log on to the thing and if they don't invite you, what are they, like, literally, what are they going to do? There's no other tanks,
I mean, I showed up as Ret Paladin the last month or so in my raid, and I was like, nope, no Mystic Touch for you guys.
Fair enough, yeah.
I mean, lots of people did that with Ret Paladin because, Prot and Ret were so good, but still.
But circling back, I will say that the lack of class tuning is a bit surprising, just because there's been so little class tuning. Now, the tuning is something that we hailed as like pretty good for this whole entire patch. Tuning's certainly been better, just looking at raid testing.
So, yes, if it goes live like it is right now, this would be like bottom 10th percentile of class tuning for a raid tier, I think. Maybe not bottom 10th, but like pretty bad.
I will be playing Warlock.
Yeah, like it's like you're gonna play one mage tops. You're gonna play the one mage, but like the person playing mage is not gonna be happy about it.
The mage is gonna be mad.
Yeah, you're gonna be playing like you're gonna play 2 prot paladins, right?
5 locks. Like the answer is actually 5 warlocks or some shit. It's that spec is 3 of their specs unbelievably broken.
Yeah, like
oh yeah, I saw your tweet, Jarno. So you think double prot pally is the move still?
I feel like you'd play double prot pally on a lot of these fights. I do think you'd want like a brew if you want Mystic Touch from your tank, which maybe you're gonna, and then maybe you also want a DK for like Ziskaran grips. But
yeah,
I don't know. Prot pally is so good, and like spell warding has so much utility on a lot of these fights. Bubble has a lot of utility on a lot of these fights as well. Like it's hard to.
I saw the last boss has like an 18-second dot that does damage to the raid based on how much it did to the tank, and like prot pally can block dot damage if they're in their consecrate.
You press consecration and it's insane, right? Like other tanks have to do so much work to mitigate that kind of thing, but like you can bubble and spell ward so frequently, and then also you can just use like huge DR cooldowns, and also you can just stand and consecrate against that. Now, to be fair, Ignore Pain is historically really good against that effect as well. Monk's Dagger and Celestial Brew is also really good against it. But there's some classes like Guardian Druid that are just looking at that mechanic and are like, well, the whole raid's getting hit for the full damage I'm taking. So
bad on Bear.
Good luck. Power and shield me.
If they don't do any class tuning, is it just Prot Paladin again for M+ as well?
It's like not
even just raid,
100%.
Right?
Yeah. Probably is like head and shoulders above right now of any other tank. And honestly, I don't know what they could do to make it fair. I feel like they're either going to leave it how it is, or they're going to over nerf it and make it pretty hard to play again. But I don't know. We'll see what they do.
Yeah, the one I'm kind of worried about them doing is a damage nerf, because I feel like you could make us play other tanks by making them do a lot more damage than Prot Paladin, but that would be the least fun way to change it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like tanks are typically balanced single target wise. Maybe one tank does a little bit more, but yeah, I mean the thing that's usually the most unbalanced about tanking is the defensive qualities. That's usually like the last pass they do on tanks, and sometimes they just don't get
Yes.
to it. So
Yeah.
it could just be a toss up.
So circling back to the raid fights, how have you liked how the raid fights have looked since we've done all the testing? What have you guys been thinking just about the bosses?
I love this one that is up right now is Neltharion. That fight was so cool on Mythic. Good lord, this is unbelievably sweet and creative encounter. Ziskarn also pretty promising. Rashok pretty promising. Forgotten Experiments even. Shadowflame Chamber, those are looking fun on Mythic. Magmarax, a little bit skeptical of that's one where it's like the room is just filling up with lava, and from testing it's like, okay, how on earth are we supposed to get how on earth are we supposed to survive this for 5 minutes before the room fills up with lava? But if they land that right and it is actually like doable but nuclear difficulty, that could be fun too.
Are you worried about melee this tier?
Yeah, very worried about melee this tier. A lot of these fights seem pretty hostile to melee. Seems like it'll be very hard to be doing efficient damage. On Magmarax, for instance, you have the soak, but if the soak is done too close to the boss, you wipe. So melee, if they're participating in that soak, are going to have to be losing uptime for that.
That's not cool.
Another big thing about this is like on Mythic, first off, the puddles never fully go away.
Yeah.
But the biggest variable with the puddles on this fight is that they spawn randomly.
Yeah.
And oh lord, they do. Sometimes in the dead center of your room they'll spawn, and your melee are just burdens, because you have to like juggle stacks, right? Because you stop shrinking the puddle past once you have 8 stacks. Okay, well,
yeah. You die at 20 stacks is now how it works.
You die at 20. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I
mean, that kind of thing. Yeah. I think typically in the last few tiers they've solved that early on and made it more melee friendly. Like sometimes there's 2 ads that spawn in a fight, for example, and they're both like out of melee range of the boss, and then they're like, okay, one always needs to spawn a melee just because half our specs need to be able to deal with this mechanic. But I guess, is that a problem on like every single boss? Is there a melee problem?
Not on every boss, but on a solid like 4 out of the 8 that were tested, it seems like it would be really hard to play more than like 3 or 4 even melee profitably. And the problem as well with those is that like they're the later bosses as well, it seems. So
yeah,
I'm worried. I'm not like confident that it'll be an anti-melee tier, but I'm definitely worried about it. And I think it's like a big possibility is that it's going to be a extremely hostile to melee tier.
Yeah,
I guess it's just a matter of how soon it gets turned around, because I think almost always we see it get fixed eventually, and I'm thinking recently it's been pretty quick. But there were tiers like in early BFA where the melee problems weren't really resolved until months into the tier, like on Mithrax.
This might just be a ranged tier. Like it might just be a situation where this is just like a ranged tier.
Yeah,
which,
could be.
Sure. We haven't had one in a bit. Most of the tiers have been fairly neutral, I will say. Not necessarily like melee favored, but they've been neutral.
All right, so that's our look at Aberrus, the Shadowed Crucible. That's the raid that's going to be coming out in 10.1. Class tuning as well. Still,
hopefully,
something that we're hoping to see as well. But for now, let's move on to our Tip of the Week segment. My Tip of the Week is, speaking of gear, crafted gear. Right now on PTR, if you copy a character over with 418 crafted gear, it goes up to 421. And there was actually a patch note that said something about Season 1 crafted gear becoming able to go up to 421. Now, it's unclear if our old 418s are going to get turned into 421s automatically, or if you'll have to like recraft them or something like that. But either way, take note of the possibility that old Spark gear will potentially be 421 next patch, which might mean that there are going to be some new upgrades you can get now effectively for your character that will be upgrades for you at the start of the new season. Obviously, it's 3 item levels difference, so it's not a big deal for anybody. These items will get replaced pretty early into next patch. But if you're looking to min-max how powerful your character is going to be on that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of the new patch, this is something to be aware of as something that might happen. Look through the crafted gear and see like, hey, is there actually anything here that is an upgrade for me at 421 that I wasn't interested in at 418? All right. Trell, what is your tip of the week?
Great tip, Dreadnoughts. That one was a little bit better than the average tip I've heard recently. Got to give you some credit for that one.
Thank you.
Mine, however, is way
Holy
worse
shit.
than usual. So in PoE, if you take your body armor off, you get a slight bonus in movement speed. Just thought I'd point that out.
That's really good. Yeah, you use that if you're racing. You definitely don't want to get the movement speed penalty putting on a body armor too early. It's only like 5%. It actually depends on if it's an armor or evasion or whatever base, but yeah. If you are playing a duelist as well, this node over here.
No, there's no way.
If you're playing
There's
a duelist,
no way.
this node over here lets you ignore all movement penalties from armor. Art of the Gladiator. So when you pick that up, obviously
man, you just knew where that was and everything.
He
Yeah,
hijacked your
everything
tip too. Holy shit! You just got your tip hijacked.
Dude,
That was
before the
great.
show started, Trell was like, I don't know if I should do this. I don't know if I should do this PoE tip. And I was like, you gotta. Somebody other than me has got to do a nonsense tip every once in a while, man. Otherwise I look really bad.
Man, I'm out of tips. I don't want to do like this is how you pull this mini boss and Halls of Valor tip because there's like 1 week left. But like,
Well, I got a
sometimes
great.
you got.
I got a great
Sometimes
clip.
it's good to play other video games.
All right. Speaking of things, here's the clip that you were talking about, Tuttles. What's happening here?
So if you do this snap differently than Dorky does it, then you would be able to snap the mobs without using a tricks of the trade. And this is actually if you are mounted up and you don't get meleeed by the mobs at all. You can actually snap the mobs in between the platforms, but it requires you to not get meleeed, which is very difficult to do versus the foragers, which is why you see Dorky get meleeed and fall to his death. Now, it is possible. However, if Dorky, I don't know. I think that there are specific packs that you can do it with, and anything that has a forager, you should really avoid it because otherwise you're going to pass away like that.
You know, I found another way of doing this. I'm gonna hijack your tip now.
All right, yeah, do it, please.
So I'm playing with a group for Break the Meta, right? And we don't have a rogue because that's meta class. And so we figured out a way to snap, and it's if you have anybody in the group tag the mobs at range. So like we have our mage player do it, and then
Yeah.
somebody heals that player to get healing threat. Even though the mobs are all targeting you, you can snap them up. You can take the bridge. So it's like
What?
the mage that hit them, if they still had threat, it wouldn't work for. But if the person gets healing threat from the mage, it works for both players. It's really, really weird.
That makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain that one. I just know that it works.
That absolutely makes no sense. All right.
That is cool.
Thank you.
All
Good
right.
tip.
Let's move on to talking a little bit about 10.1 prep. Just stuff, things, minor topic, a few minutes probably here about what sorts of things are changing in 10.1 and what sort of things you can do to be ready for it. So first of all, of course, the ring from the Forbidden Reach, if that is good for your spec and stuff, at some point, make sure you actually do get that Onyx Amulet, get the gems you want for it. Realistically, like if you've got time, a good thing to do over the next couple weeks is to actually get another ring and put your second best gem combo into it, or like situational ones, right? Get them ready just because like you don't want to be flying back there next patch to resocket your gems, right? So making whatever amulets you might use next patch is probably worth doing. It depends a little bit on what spec you're playing. Like if you're playing Windwalker, that thing is staying with you all tier, right? Whereas if you're playing a caster, a warlock or something, you're probably not even using it already. But
yeah, it's staying with you all tier because your class doesn't do any damage. You got to use borrowed power.
Yeah.
Same with rogue and healers and all the tanks.
Yeah. It's also worth noting that the embellishment situation is changing next patch. Elemental Lariat is getting changed as well. Elemental Lariat is no longer going to be as powerful of a buff unless you have every socket on your gear that is possible
Correct.
to have. So if you only have like 3 sockets, it's going to be like 60% as strong as it is right now. If you just have the Lariat itself with its triple sockets. Later in the patch, it'll be good again, but at the start of the patch, that might not be something worth investing in. And so the way that crafted gear is going to change is your old crafted pieces will still be either 418 or maybe 421. You can get them higher, but it will cost you a Spark of Shadow Flame, which is the new Spark of Ingenuity. And those, we don't actually know what the release cadence is for them yet. I've been trying to figure it out. I've been looking to see if there's any info about it anywhere. Haven't been able to find any. I assume it's going to be 1 every 2 weeks again, but we'll see if that, if that's true, then it's actually a little bit slower than it was last patch because there's only 1 week before the raid instead of 2. So who knows what the pace of that's going to be. But with Sparks of Shadow Flame, you can take gear all the way up to like 447 or something, 444, some very high eye level.
Yes.
With the new craft gear, it's like the 421 plus 26, I guess. So 447, yeah. Really good.
So aside from crafting changes, we also have like new tier stuff. You get like an Omni token, and the Omni token can come from either getting 2400 rating in M+, 1800 rating in PvP, or clearing the last boss in Heroic Raid, and then that allows you to get an Omni token of tier. On top of that, they sounded like they increased the amount of tier that you were getting out of the vault last tier. That's going to continue to persist. There's an Omni token that's off of Sarkareth, which is the final boss of Aberrus. And then the catalyst is on the exact same release cadence.
Right.
No catalyst here.
No catalyst early in the patch. The thing to note is, if you get an Omni token from any of these sources, probably you should not use it right away. You should probably hold on to that until you know, like, because if you use your Omni token and you make a helmet, and that makes your 2-piece, but then you see a helmet in your vault, right? You've delayed your 4-piece. Now, for some people, for some cases, it's going to be worth it to just get that 2-piece, get that power spike while you can. But for most cases, if you're like a min-max oriented player, it's probably better to wait on that one. That being said, in some cases, like depending on how big the 2-piece is relative to the 4-piece, it might be worth jumping and getting the 2-piece while you can, if you're, if it's going to help you kill an extra boss this week or something. But you just know that you're making an important decision, right? And make sure you've really thought about, okay, what if I see this in my vault? How much am I going to regret this? And
I think
definitely never craft 3-piece or 1-piece with it. Only craft 2-piece or 4-piece with it.
I think that for most players, you should hold on to it until you were getting ready to jam your 4-piece, which it really sucks. I think that I would say, if anybody asked me, I would pretty much tell everybody universally to hold on to it until you get their 4 set. There might be niche cases, but like 99 out of 100 players, I would say holding on to it is going to be your best bet. Even if that requires you to hold on to it until the catalyst is unlocked, or like the second week of the catalyst.
There's no way you're like, if you're going to be missing out on 2-piece for many weeks, it's I think, well, maybe I don't know. Like,
it depends on what you care about. At a certain point,
it's like you need the power now. Like, power now is important, right? Like, it's not about who's going to be stronger in 8 weeks, right? It's like you do want the power at some point. It's just like, it seems like it's probably not a good trade-off in this case for most people to spend it. But if you're thinking, oh, I'm not going to have 4-piece until the catalyst comes out, I would probably just make your 2-piece with the Omni token when it drops for you, then, if you're like never going to clear the raid or something.
I think the people that are going to get the Omni token from raiding or it's whichever way you acquire it early are the same people that are going to have tier sets in general pretty early. So you probably won't have to hold it too long. Like if you're on like a slightly lower level of progression and you get the Omni token, week 3 or 4, that's probably still a decent time in most cases for each player. But it's probably good to like assess your options of how to get tier and then probably hold on to it for a little bit either way.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, either way, depending on what kind of guild you're in, maybe ask somebody else playing get some opinions from your guildies about whether the decision you're making is a good one or not on it. If you think it's close, those sorts of things can be, it's an important decision. Don't just use it to buy the biggest sim upgrade for you right now. Other than that,
this is a 60 DPS upgrade. I'm
definitely do not send it on that. Do not send it on like 3-piece for an eye level upgrade. That's really
that would
bad.
be droll.
Yeah,
that would be so droll.
It's also worth noting that Primal Chaos is going away next patch, so potions are becoming sellable on the auction house. Those stupid BOP potions, that thing is gone. You can just buy them on the AH now. Bless, say,
dude,
nice.
God, that was so annoying.
Like that.
But what am I supposed to do about my 4,000 Primal Chaos?
I think it turns into a gray item that you can vendor, so...
Oh, thank God, I'm going to get 4,000 gold.
That's going to be really good. And then finally, I guess the thing to know about is going to be the upgrade system, which works from M+ and from World Content and from Raid. The basics of this is that by doing 11 and higher keys, you get the Heroic upgrade tokens, and by doing 16 and higher keys, you're going to get the Mythic upgrade tokens. And from M+, the way it works is like any item that drops from basically any mid-level key, you can upgrade all the way up to the equivalent of 411 right now, for 30 something, 437, something like that, next patch. Or if you can do a 17 or higher key, you can upgrade the end of dungeon loot from that all the way up to 441, which is low mythic level, the equivalent to 415 right now. So that's the breakpoint to remember, is if you're farming 17s or higher, you are getting mythic upgrade tokens and you're getting gear that can be upgraded to low mythic eye level. If you're doing lower than that, you're going to be getting some mixture of the heroic stuff in there instead as well. And the same comes from normal raid gear can be brought all the way up to 437. Heroic raid gear can be brought all the way up to 441. So actually, that's very close in eye level, right? That's only one eye level step away from those two things. So normal gear is actually really good to upgrade. Getting in those normal runs in these first few weeks is going to be something to look at doing. Depending on what kind of player you are, you may be doing that with your guild, or if you're somebody who's just, you raid heroic with your guild, something like that. Look to adding normal to your, normal is, there's much more power in normal this tier than there was last tier, is basically the point I'm getting at with this. LFR gear is also upgradable to, but it's a much bigger step down. It's like 420 something that it can upgrade to, and outdoor world gear also is on that LFR upgrade track. So that gear, that can be relevant if you're not doing the high level content, or if you're doing +2s and stuff. It's also on that very low upgrade track.
Now I will say that for most players, the only stuff that is you're willing to jump into a gear level lower track to get are primarily going to be 1 tier pieces or 2 class tokens, class trinkets, which we didn't talk about, but there are very rare items that drop from the raid that work only with very specific classes, and then they give you a pretty significant damage gain depending on what your class does. For it's like lock, shaman plus something, or hunter maybe. It's summoned pets do make you proc a primary stat that does more damage. And obviously that works great with things like enhancement shaman with their wolves, or demo lock with their imps. And it's as you summon pets, you gain primary stat. And it's
well,
those
they normalize that. They normalize that. They gave it this cool thing where it's the stack you build up and then you spend it whenever you summon your big pet to get all the stats. So it's kind of normalized now between all those specs. It's not super OP for anybody else, for any of them anymore, except it scales really well with haste. So it's sort of OP for demo and stuff still. But yeah, it's these Neltharian's Call trinkets from Echo of Neltharion. And yeah, if you get these on normal, you upgrade them to 437. Actually, if you get them on heroic, they're higher than the upgrade track even goes. They're 444 already, so you don't even have to invest any upgrade tokens in them. They're already above. Upgrade track can only ever take items to 441. And then on Mythic, these things will be 457 out of the... out of the thing. Man, maybe I've got the numbers wrong. Is this right? Yeah, I think
is that the penultimate boss?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay, yeah, I think I've got the numbers right. Yeah. But yeah, okay, so that's... I think you're right. I mean, the thing is, though, that, if you have, a normal bracers or whatever, upgrading that thing to 437 is actually not going to cost you too many vital resources. The resources to upgrade these things are not... They're not on a very aggressive cap. You can get 10 of each crest per week, and you only ever need, 4 crests for any given item of each type. So to upgrade a low normal item to high heroic takes 4 normal crests and 4 heroic crests. So in the first few weeks, you're maybe going to be constrained on how many of those you have, but even by week 2, I think you're going to have more crests than you know what to do with in a lot of cases, because it just takes so few of them to upgrade on any of these items. And especially if your item is coming from mid or late through the raid, you're only going to need 2 crests for it. And it's going to be, and you get 10 per crest type per week. So we'll have to see exactly how that ends up feeling. And you do need to grind some bosses or some dungeons to get those crests. So you may be below the cap, but still be limited on how many crests you have. But either way, I think the big takeaway is the upgrade system is going to be really powerful, and it applies to raid items now, not just M+ items. So upgrading your raid and M+ items all the way up to either high heroic or low mythic, depending on where they come from, is going to be big.
We have a question in chat. Did Blizzard ever clarify if the Omni token from Sarkareth will scale with group size, or is the optimal size still 10 players?
They haven't clarified. I got a message from a source earlier today that says it may... I got a source that says it works on top of the normal loot table at a rate of 1 token per 10 players. It drops as personal loot, but fully tradable. So a 30-person Sarkareth group would get 6 loot pieces and 3 tokens, 3 Omni tokens.
Holy
which,
shit. Okay.
if that's true, it's actually really important that it does work that way, because if it was only just 1 per raid, right, then you would always be killing Sarkareth in 10-player splits, and that would be really annoying, right? Like you would be losing loot tokens by going above 10. So hopefully it does in fact work that way.
Dude, I love that. I love that you had the investigative journalism already on deck for this question.
I've been asking around about this one, so I've got my. But again, that is an unconfirmed source, unnamed unconfirmed source. But hopefully that is how it works. It is not confirmed. All right. Speaking of Q&A questions from chat and stuff, I think we should get to that. But first, we get to thank supporters over on the Patreon. They are: why do I get a 30-minute penalty for leaving a time-walking dungeon, but I can leave anyone's key and then queue for another?
Dude, I actually do think that there's a little bit of difference. I will say that I think that there's something different about queuable content versus grouped content out of it, even if it is out of LFG.
I do think you shouldn't get a leaver penalty if you get kicked, though. I don't know, especially like, I guess it's to stop you from like griefing to get kicked instead of leaving. I guess that makes sense, but like, man, it feels bad. There's so many cases just like somebody joins, it's a 4-stack, the 4-stack kicks them, and they get a leaver penalty. Like, that's just messed up.
Yeah, that would suck.
At least it shouldn't happen if a 4-stack kicks you or like a 3-stack kicks you, right? Like that. It should not come.
I mean, that could even be triggered by joining a group with your friends, and they just remove you as a joke, and they like put a lockout on your character. Like,
I'd be so annoyed.
Like that. Yeah. I don't know if that could really work in this kind of game mode.
More often than not, like, I don't think you need a lever whenever you leave like an M+ dungeon either, right? Like sometimes people are being bad actors. So and saying that it never happens is just a lie. But I think more often than not, people act pretty reasonably whenever they leave a key. They only leave the key whenever something has gone wrong. And obviously the times where it's like shitty of them sticks out in your mind, but more often than not, whenever you or somebody else leaves a key, you don't need a penalty because you wiped 3 times and you're not timing that dungeon. Like, you don't need a penalty.
I think something like the League of Legends system of like, hey, if you leave one time walking dungeon, you get a warning, right? And then if you leave your next time walking dungeon, now you're going to start getting a queue penalty or whatever. I think that would be better as well than just like immediately giving you deserter. But I don't know if the technology is there in our World of Warcraft for that level of sophistication. Quackshock finally got all his portals. Grass Quackshock. Nevernude, Ja, King of Skills, Dratnus Dinopillow, Chromed, Trekkie, Chewy. What if astrology is real, but humans don't have the math yet to prove it? Like before Newton discovered calculus for gravity, people once believed the Earth was flat. That's a good point. I think astrology is real, though. You can just see the stars up in the sky. It's obviously true, right? So
true, yeah.
You know what? You're making a good point. I do see all of the stars in the sky.
Yeah. Well, you can't see all of them, right? Because half of them are below Earth at any given time.
All of the ones that I can't see just don't exist.
I see. Okay, yeah. We're still working on object permanence over there, yeah. ZivXX, Salty Senny, Necris, Sinmora, Tankdil, Nevuk, Eevee, Unholy DK's Rise Up, No Trick, I Forgot I Was Subbed Here, Dymat, Freehold Waiting Room, Rework Mistweaver, PSA, causing a wipe in a key doesn't count if you scream at people, then rage quit before the key is complete. Good tech. That's good tech. Nyx, well, I was wrong. The devs must actually understand the players. Gallic, Brusif, Tyrannosaurus Abyss, Nakud Offensive is named after Clan Nakud. What are the other 3 major clans of the Maruk? Like and subscribe if Dratnos gets them all. Tirai.
Okay.
Shakar.
Okay.
Onir.
Okay.
That's my final answer.
We had a lore question last week about the Aegis of Agrabah, and we were very lost.
What was the question?
Was
it the other artifacts?
Yeah. Hold on.
Tidestone of Golganeth. Okay, Tidestone of Golganeth, Aegis of Agrabah. There's like the Tear of Purity or something.
Tear of Elune?
Tear of Elune.
Excuse me?
I don't remember the last one.
I can't remember the others either.
Oh, yeah,
That's like the only one I know.
And HOV Scovald is after the Aegis of Agrabah. What are the other pillars of creation?
Yeah.
That's what it was. We did not know anything of them.
M Sanity, Xena, Rogue is now good enough for Prog, but it's still bad enough to stat for SLG. Bless up, Red Color.
Bless up.
YouTube.com/Workbringer, Alphabet Soup, Druid Friends of Evolved Gaming, number one Simsky for Trelsky, Lurka's back in the States, but was he ever really gone from our hearts? Milk, Sife, Pone, Windwalker Monks deal with nerfs by rolling with the punches, Thesaurus.com is a powerful tool, the Marsh Hare, Veil Strider Spar, in before Blizzard brings back Stonecore for 10.2 so they can keep the theme of seasons with a worm boss alive, Big Head Small Brain, Narnar TV says hi to Uncle Carmine, Agitar, Juniper, Vivoker is now V Phoenix because again, pink class equals damage, Husky plays a plus 16 gardening until 10.1, Trill, you got any gardening tips? Any lawn care? No tip of the weeks for... You don't have to give them now. You can save them for tip of the week for next week, but that could be good. Lawnmower.
I'll have to think on that.
Okay, yeah.
Just think of my basic lawn and how to improve it by next week.
Rat Run out of town this week, so I'll fill like a punk legend, and then this guy just typed nah like 30 times. I'm not going to say nah 30 times.
Nah.
Chauncey. that moment where your tank says, now where's my ranged at? During Jade Serpent Dragon Boss and bricks your key. Feral Druids in the MDI, you've got to be kidding me. Oh, you don't have that yet? Boom. Sire Dematicus and the small mammal living in Dratnos' shirt and Sapphire.
Oh, he really loves reading that one, I could tell.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, we
What's up?
I wish I saw this earlier. Apparently there was a community council live chat with Matt Villers and Morgan Day
Interesting.
over in Plus that we missed. So after
cool.
after you listen to this podcast, you should go listen to that. Looks like it's an hour long.
I see. Is there a Wowhead post that summarizes it yet?
Not yet. Squishy DM'd me some screenshots if you want to pull up some of the most important quotes.
Sure.
There's that.
Yeah, I forgot that was going on.
Yeah, I didn't know that was going on. I'm a community council emeritus member now. My year in the community council is up. I never asked any questions or said anything on the forums. I was quite bad at my job. I'm sorry, everybody. In my defense.
So like a true college alumni.
Yeah, I didn't have anything. I never had a good point. I was saving my post and I didn't have one. The problem was like I would have had some at the start, but then they just kept making good changes in the last few months of mine, so I just never had anything to complain about as I was running out of time. So, anyways, okay.
Solid.
One of the overarching goals for season 2 was a little bit of de-escalation, disarming of dungeons and affixes. Seems really good.
Go with
Again,
this? Yeah.
there's just kind of nowhere to go, but this was the only direction that I think was good to take them, and that will like leave them some room above now to push affixes and dungeons a little bit if they need to. Affixes are meant to provide a challenge, but we saw some degree of that with Thundering, where we had the Kiss Curse element. We said we need to offset this so we don't run into a situation where actually a level 7 M+ is easier than a level 6 M+, because now you've got all these buffs that are turning on. So this is them saying why the regular affixes aren't Kiss Curse. I do kind of remember this a little bit with, you remember Awakened Workshop, where level 10 Workshop was actually much easier than level 9 because you could just skip the whole gauntlet with the Awakened Obelisk.
Yeah.
That was really funny.
That was nice.
Something similar happened with Shrouded, where Shrouded was, you saw more keys being timed at the level 10 affix whenever Shrouded got added to dungeons as opposed to whenever it was removed, because just because of how it interacted with some of the mobs.
Yeah, I think if they wanted to fix this, though, they could just put the health coefficient thing on it as well, like a health and damage. Like, hey, level 7 is just gonna be 2 levels worth of health and damage, right? Like,
Squishy and I were talking the other day, and he is actually like firmly of the opinion that one affix row should be negative and one affix row should be purely positive. Would you be okay with that?
I would be okay with it. I don't think it needs to happen, but like I think affixes, like I think Entangling, for instance, is going to be a great affix, and it doesn't have anything positive for the character. Reaping was a great affix, and unless you were funneling, I guess it didn't do anything positive for you. So I don't think it's necessary, but I do think it's a space I would be happy if they explored that space a little bit more, because it's often been good. But Thundering is a Kiss Curse affix, and it sucks. So Kiss Curse isn't a silver bullet.
Yeah, I think that it certainly can improve.
I think in a perfect world, that sounds really cool. I just don't know how they would ever balance having a positive buff and a negative buff every week that rotates.
A major goal of ours moving into season 2 is that And the direction that we are moving is that we want the dungeon to be the most impactful that you're interacting with. The affixes are there to add texture and variety and enable opportunities for you to feel like a hero and use some utility. This seems sweet. Yeah, like again, this is what we've been talking about a lot, is playing the dungeon, not the affixes, has been something we've been hoping to get back to. So I'm glad that they're agreeers.
These are definitely the things that we were looking for, is just because like a lot of the times the dungeons felt like they were too much affix favored in a lot of situations where it's like, oh, thank God I lost a minute and a half to bolstering here. What more could I have done?
All right, then there's
well, before we move to
go
that
ahead.
last one, I think that they've actually largely solved this issue of playing the affix now with all
Yeah.
these recent insanely good changes, except for Incorporeal, I think is still in that boat where you're gonna have to play that affix way more than the dungeon. And that's the only one, honestly.
I think we tend to agree.
Some of the design philosophy in Season 2 has been to pull damage out of the affixes. Entangling, Incorporeal, Afflicted, they all don't have damage associated with their penalties. If they go off, you might take a throughput hit. It's going to slow down your run, but people won't suddenly die, or they shouldn't.
I
think
if you get stunned by entangling.
Yeah, in high keys, like if you get stunned by entangling, you're probably pretty likely to die. Not that. I mean, compare it to a Thundering Stun, right? A Thundering Stun is like 6 seconds and it deals 150% of your health while it's active. An Entangling Stun is just 3 seconds and it doesn't do any damage by itself. So I think you're probably going to live it most of the time you get stunned, but you definitely might die, but I think that's fine, especially in high keys.
And in an afflicted mob going off, you're at 0 haste for 8 seconds, or incorporeally doing 50% reduced healing and damage.
Yeah, again, though, that's like...
You're not instantly dying, I guess. That is true.
wall, right? Like, I don't know, like, obviously if it goes off in a 27 where if anything goes wrong, you're going to wipe, right? But like, if I think there's counterplay to this even in like the 24 range, which is good.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I think it's
absolutely
totally reasonable. I think that I also tend to agree that you shouldn't instantly die if you watch yourself die because you can't press Death Strike because your haste is 0.
Dude, the thing about Thundering, man, it's worse than killing you. It stuns you for 6 seconds and does like 8 zillion damage, but it doesn't just straight up kill you. It's like in... You ever played TFT and somebody has one of those avatars where it plays a cutscene before it kills you? Yes! It's so tilting. You're just sitting there watching this cutscene go off, knowing that you're dead, but you have to sit there and watch it happen. It doesn't just instantly kill you. That's exactly what Thundering feels like.
That's the worst, man.
You dies of cutscene. Yeah,
dies of cutscene. Yep.
Oh, man.
Holy shit. That's a good one. Holy moly.
And then finally we have... I think that we just have to accept that when we're giving players an infinitely scaling mode and you can make it as hard as you want, we're basically saying, yeah, go nuts, figure out ways to be creative, figure out ways to break the game.
I love it.
I think that, I mean, to some extent, like, you know, if they see something they don't want us to do, they can and should fix that and continue to fix them. But to some extent, it's like certain things, it's like, yeah, okay, if this is the way that everybody solves this problem and it's within the rules, like, I don't know, when they fix that, they should then nerf the underlying thing if it was like super egregious or something. I don't know.
Typically my view on things, it really depends on like what context this was brought up in. If you're looking at like exploit versus creative use of game mechanics, typically my line is like, if it was something that was like originated outside of the dungeon itself, more often than not, I think that's like Zinkiki originated outside. I mean, we talked about this like maybe a couple weeks ago. Zinkiki originated outside of the dungeons themselves. Right, where it's like I view that as like people got punished for it, whereas like whatever, if you're snapping a mob, that's like okay, yeah, that's just like how the dungeon works, right? Like it's not a way to get banned.
I mostly think about like, is this something I would like to be correct to do? Right? Is this something am I happier that I will do this in all of my dungeon runs, or is this something that's making me sad? For instance, Freehold. Do you remember in Freehold when you would go in an M0 and kill Ludwig on M0 so that you didn't have to kill him on M+?
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
That is something that I hope they change or make, you know, like that's something where I'm hoping they change it because it's not fun to do, right? Like, I don't want every Freehold dungeon that I do to involve me stealthing ahead and killing Ludwig on M0 before we start the dungeon, because that is stupid and annoying. So if there's stuff like that, or getting Zenkiki, or even like getting some Draenor profession item to make something work, those are the things where I'm like, okay, this is kind of dumb, right? Like I
Mhm.
don't like that M plus is about this. But when it's like, hey, you're snapping these mobs, or like you're pulling this mob through a wall or whatever, those things I think can be cool and interesting to do. If it's a case of like, oh, the dungeon is, 3 minutes faster or 5 minutes faster by doing this versus not, then I think that it's probably too valuable, too powerful to do that, and they should not. It shouldn't be that good, right? Like the difference between snapping and not snapping in some of these dungeons, I think should be. It's something that it's good that it's not a Taldazar anymore, right? Where like you're just completely trolling if you don't snap.
Snapping just has so many issues involved with its
Yeah.
existence. Like, I really wish they would just make it so snapping always took the player to the mob, so that you can
Oh, the
never
The problem with that is it's
ever abuse it.
really unfun to have that happen to you accidentally, right? Like
Yeah,
if you're like a casual player, you're just doing a dungeon and a mob just teleports you to it and then one shots you, like, if that starts happening more often, I think people would be mad in lower keys.
Charles, just think about every single time a mob has evaded in the history of this game. If every single time it evaded, it snapped you to it, it would be fucking annoying.
well, yeah, but like the thing is, if casual players experience that, it's kind of the same thing as if they accidentally tagged a mob and it snapped to them on the next pull or whatever, because that's still going to be like a wipe situation for them no matter what. And I think I would rather risk that in this game at this point, because like the fact that all the MDI teams and TGP teams have to do snapping to be competitive and just risk an RNG chance of losing their run or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that consequence is way worse than having like an evade
I
mob snap the tank to them every once in a while.
see where you're coming from with this. Then okay,
I
Like,
think
just
I think that it would be
I've-
better. Like just they used to be that mobs were more consistent with how they snapped, right? Like this whole thing in Algathar where it's like 90% chance that some of the lashers don't snap or whatever is really annoying. I agree that part of
Yeah.
it's annoying because it's just like, oh, this is the best strategy. You're only going to time the key if you do this. And yet, if you do this, you're also just opening up RNG of it failing. Like that, that shouldn't
yeah, I just really don't like
coexist.
that
I agree.
chance. I think that here's the thing about snapping is it used to be, when it first started being noticeable in like Legion BFA, there were two types of snapping. One, the way we just talked about, where the mobs pull the players to the mobs instantly.
yeah.
Or two, the mobs snap to the players instantly without evading at all. They just come right to you and fight you wherever you are. And that was like the Ataldazar snap. And then they changed it going into Shadowlands, I think, where
Yeah.
when mobs teleport to players, they now evade for like 3 to 4 seconds and then become active and resume their cast sequence.
I
But,
will say the Darkheart Thicket one, which is the first one you referenced, was so painfully annoying though.
Yeah, that was annoying for sure. I don't remember even encountering that as like a casual player in Legion, personally.
What do you think? What would you think about, instead of them snapping you to them, just resetting if they like, especially if it was like 40 yards away or whatever, like if you do the Algathar snap and it's like, oh, that guy's 100 yards away from me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just dropping combat, right?
Shrine of the Storm had that, where if you
Yeah.
got too far away, they would just
Holy
leash.
shit.
They would evade and leash. And
Oh,
not
I
snap at all.
forgot
Do you
about
remember-
that.
Do you remember like
Totally.
Toldagor and
God.
Shrine, where it was like if you jumped, the mobs would evade or would
Yeah.
reset, but if you didn't jump,
Yeah.
they would stay on you? Yeah.
Dude, you remember that Shrine of the Storm rock that you walked
Yeah.
over and you snapped the mobs into them and it would evade the whole pack out, and every other mob that you walked into for like the last like 15 seconds would just evade out and reset, and you're like, this is the greatest stealth skip of all time, and it is
Yeah.
just like the whole dungeon.
Yeah.
I think
Oh
all these have like their
God.
pros and cons, but I feel like that last version of it is actually better than just having the option to snap mobs and risk the failure. Like, I don't know. I feel like something should be done about it.
You couldn't get the mobs out of the rock. That's the problem with that. I don't know.
All right.
There's definitely something they could do.
Our next question comes from Paul in Discord, who says, a little bit less of a question, more of a thought experiment or something. In an attempt to rework the M Plus title to be less of a measure of time invested and more a measure of efficiency and skill, what if it worked like this? A set number of weeks into the season, the title activates. Anyone who is within range of the title for some other number of time earns the title. So, like, the title activates some number of weeks in, and then if you spend a month above the title cutoff, you get the title.
Oh.
And it's any of the time in there, rather than like end of season, the title locks in and you got above, you got points if you're above it or whatever.
Would have to be a lower number of players, right?
Well, yeah, I guess because in theory more people could get this title. Also, in theory, less could, right? Like if if 9,000 people were competing for 1,000 spots and they each spent 2
Oh.
weeks above the line, nobody would get the title, right? But in practice, yeah.
Yeah. I guess. I don't know. I guess
I think it's interesting.
that would be kind of interesting. I view the measurable downside is like it de-incentivizes players to play through the whole entire season, which I think is.
Well, you do.
I think that you should. I think that
if
you
you
should
have
play
to
the whole
stay
season.
above the line for a whole month, right? Like, you have to get really far ahead of it to be safe for a month to stop playing, right?
I really
Yeah.
like where the title thing is at right now because it creates this whole scene of pug players that are really good. Like there's some really solid pug players doing 26s in LFG. I keep coming across them every week, like helping certain friends pug their keys, trying to get rank 1 title. I love that people are still playing this late in the season. I think it's actually been really good for the community at large.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if because there's some games that have like points that you accumulate every week, right, based on where you are on the ladder, that kind of stuff. I would be open to seeing something like this, but I do agree with you, Trell, that like the current system does have a lot of nice stuff about it too that I'd be worried about losing. So, yeah, it's an interesting idea though. I think it's cool. All right, next question comes from Fizzlewiz in Discord that says, "Do we ever see a future where all casters can cast and move without spells such as ice flows? Is planting to cast a necessary mechanic or just a dated one?" So basically, it's like, would we ever move to a world where all casts are castable while moving? No, I don't think so. I think that's like a core part of spell casting is that you have to be standing still while doing it, right? Like, I don't know. I think you could make an MMO without that, but it seems, I think it's too like woven into the fabric of WoW. I wouldn't be surprised if we keep seeing a little bit more creep towards castable while moving, but because that, like, historically, right, over the past 10 years, a lot casters now have more like tools for casting while moving, such as ice flows and hover and stuff, but
Yeah,
I don't
true.
think it's going to move to a world of like every spell just works while moving. No.
Even
that's always just
abilities and stuff like that have been woven into most ranged DPS too. What were you gonna say, Charles? Sorry.
I was just gonna say that's like a very common theme in every MMO and ARPG. Like multiple game modes have this caster versus melee paradigm where a lot of people kind of like fit in one category over the other, and it's kind of cool to like share that unique perspective versus one another, or some players that play both perspectives all the time. It's kind of cool to swap back and forth. I can't really see it going anywhere personally.
Yeah, I think that the cast, like a lot of the skill expression of playing a caster as well, comes from like the fact that you can't cast while moving, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
It is obviously like annoying whenever you get owned, right? Like whenever you have to cancel your fire blast at 0.1 seconds or whatever. Like, okay, that sucks, but like planning out your movement, doing your movement globals while you're moving, like that is all the skill of, or that's a large part of the skill of being a ranged DPS, right?
Nothing makes me feel dumber than having to cancel a cast over halfway through and then you plant and you start casting again and you have to cancel the second one again. You were like, I am an idiot. I do not deserve to cast anymore. Like I am so dumb, because if you have to, like, if you plant and you cancel 2 casts in a row, that means you just fucked something up.
Yeah. Or you just got very unlucky with being targeted by McCann. Sometimes that does happen, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, the swirlies have all been targeting me, but yeah.
More often than not, it's a mistake, but yeah, you can't just be unlucky.
All right, well, we've exhausted our questions list for the week. We've exhausted our topics list for the week. That means we've exhausted our episode for the week. We will be back next week to discuss some more. That'll be our last podcast of 10.0 cycle, so hopefully it should be a good one. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us, though. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast, and we will see you next week.
GG.
GG's.
GG's.